Josh Jacobs and the Raiders, a very different situation. Josh Jacobs, franchise tag, not yet accepted, $10.1 million. My understanding there is, despite any reporting suggesting there was progress, there were discussions that were fruitful, they were close, they were whatever, and I know that this has been reported to some degree by Vic Tafur of The Athletic, nothing has gone on between the Raiders and Josh Jacobs. Nothing. Dating back to before they even franchise tagged him. They were always going to franchise tag him. They weren't going to sign him to a long-term deal before applying the tag. Then once the tag was applied, crickets. No effort to negotiate a long-term deal. And then when there finally was an effort, Myles, to negotiate a long-term deal, the caveat, I'm told, per sources, was along the lines of, well, we need to make you an offer so you can never say we didn't make you an offer. So it was never really an honest effort to try to get the guy signed. There was an element of PR to it, right? We can't just ride out your franchise tag. We have to at least create the impression we tried to sign you to a multi-year deal. The offer was never even close to being acceptable. Yes, he was sitting out in the parking lot, but that was just in the eventuality that they would be in a position to get a deal done. He could run in and sign it, and it would be over at that point. There was never any serious negotiation. So here we are. And what was leaked earlier this week, I believe, by the Raiders, this idea that they're open to resuming talks and that kind of vague hint that maybe they would do something like what the Giants did with Saquon Barkley, where you come in for the 10.1 and you can make more on top of it in incentives. If they are willing to, there's been no effort to actually do it in the days since that report surfaced. There is nothing going on right now between the Raiders and Josh Jacobs. And he continues not being in camp, and there's no financial consequence because he's not under contract. He's no more employed right now by the Raiders, Myles, than you or I are.
Well, that's interesting way to put it like that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what the end game is for the Raiders. I mean, if you just want them for a 1-year deal, if that just seems to be what they want, then okay. But I mean, what you said basically is they made him an offer he had to refuse, because otherwise it would have been ridiculous for him to sign a contract like that. So, I mean, at this point, why come in and work during training camp in, 100+ degree heat like it is out there in Las Vegas every day if you don't really have to? He can stay in shape on his own. He knows the playbook already. It's not like it's changing all that much. And he can come in and he can sign in, let's call it the week before the season starts, get himself into his best playing shape as he possibly can, and then he can collect his game checks that would add up to 10.1 million. I understand that approach there. But if you're the Raiders and it's like, you say publicly that you want something, and then privately your actions are telling an entirely different story. It's like, well, if at one point, I mean, we can put this out there. Is there a point where you just say, let's just go with Zamir White? Let's go with the backs that we've got. And maybe we just rescind the tag because, I mean, we really want Josh Jacobs here for the long term. Our actions have said, no, we do not. So why are we going to pay this guy 10.1 million when, if you look at our division, man, it's going to be tough for us to be really all that competitive. And how much better is is Josh Jacobs than Zamir White and the rest of the backs that we've got? I mean, that's the kind of thing that maybe you talk yourself into if you're the Las Vegas Raiders over the course of this month. I don't know that that's going to happen, but it's not out of the realm of possibility to me.
Well, and that's a reflection of the running back market at large. The surplus value, is it there? Is the 10.1 million in value there with Josh Jacobs, dollar for dollar, between what he brings to the table and what Zamir White could do? And at some point, you say, we're just going to save the 10.1 million and we're going to move on. And Myles, that very well may have been the Belichickian strategic 4D chess endgame all along. They had to tag him because he had a big year last year. They had to. Josh McDaniels knows we can't just let this guy walk away in free agency. He was the leading rusher, the first ever winner of the Jim Brown Award. We didn't expect it. We came in thinking, hey, we're not picking up the fifth-year option. We're not interested. in extending this. I think that what he was told was, well, we need to get to know him. And, of course, they didn't need to get to know Devontae Adams before they gave him a big pile of money. They didn't need to get to know Derek Carr before they gave him a new contract. And once they got to know him, they ripped it up. But, but it's baloney. It's baloney. Yeah, we don't let Max Crosby. We give him a huge contract.
Mike,
this is the position.
And we did this show a year ago, and we were talking about Josh Jacobs playing in the Hall of Fame game because it was like, whoa, what is this? You don't play a guy who you really think is going to be a major contributor in the Hall of Fame game. So that tells us exactly what the Raiders thought of Josh Jacobs at that point.
And then he forced their hand. He earned the placement of a C on his jersey. He led the league in rushing. He was one of the few bright spots the team had. So what are you going to do? You're going to let him walk away? We can't let him walk away. Well, sign a long-term deal like the Buccaneers had to do when they didn't pick up the fifth-year option on the muscle hamster, Doug Martin. Remember him? They didn't pick up the fifth-year option. He had a big year, and he got a big contract instead of the franchise tag. No, we don't want to do that either. That doesn't make sense financially. So, when you're going to tag somebody, if you want to turn it into a long-term deal, it's very simple. This year's tag and next year's tag, fully guaranteed at signing, and then you throw some stuff onto the back end so the team can control the situation for year 3, year 4, maybe year 5. They weren't even remotely close to that. So why would he do a long-term deal? You want to pay me year to year? Fine. I'll eventually, if he shows up, take the 10-1, and then you tag me next year, and I'll get a 20% raise, $12 million or so. And then after that, you become a free agent. But that's the problem. What do you have left after 6 years? What is still in the tank? Who is going to pay you after you have played 6 years? And that's where we've heard so many running backs say this now. They use that against you. Oh, you've had a great career. Well, you're kind of banged up. You're kind of old by running back standards. We'll just go draft somebody in round 4 and pay him a hell of a lot less than what you're looking for and take our chances that way. So I think that's what the Raiders want to do. They want to go year to year. The question is, will Jacobs show up? I think if they would offer, I don't know this, I think if they would offer him a promise they wouldn't use the tag next year, he would show up. And maybe they'd want to put some performance triggers in there to do it. That's what the Bears did with Lance Briggs years ago. That's what the Titans did with Albert Haynesworth once upon a time. Hasn't happened in a while. Put some triggers in there where they'd say, we'll remove the tag. That would be a way to do it if they really want to keep him around. Look, Myles, I think, and I've mentioned it's a PR thing. It's a fan thing. You don't want the fans to be upset. They got a fan that owns the team. And I think part of what they're doing here is they're working Mark Davis. They got to get Mark Davis to come to the point where he realizes we can move on and we should move on without Josh Jacobs. So we get to the end of training camp. Hey, the guy hasn't been here. The guy's not ready for the season. We get through the preseason. Hey, the guy's not been here. The guy's not ready for the season. He's just going to show up and take 10.1. How good's he going to be? He's upset with us. He may not play very hard. He may not play through some of the bumps and bruises of being a running back in the NFL. And then Mark Davis comes to the conclusion on his own, well, maybe we should rescind the tender. When all along, that's what Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were hoping for. If I had to guess, I know it's an aggressive move. It hasn't happened often, 3 times in the last 20 years. I think they removed the tender not long before the start of the season, unless Josh Jacobs pounces on it first. That's the everybody's kind of sitting back and waiting. Is he going to jump on it, or are they going to remove it? And I think if they remove it, he knows he's not getting 10-1 elsewhere, and he doesn't care. And I think if they remove it, he goes straight to Kansas City. And wouldn't that be something? You get another Marcus Allen, right? Your running back falls out of favor, and you go straight to Kansas City.
Yeah, that would be interesting, if he did do that. And then, he would have to take probably less money. But, man, you talk about, 3-headed monsters.
That'd be fine.
Josh Jacobs with Isaiah Pacheco, and then also Jerick McKinnon in that backfield with Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, that's a pretty scary prospect maybe for the rest of the league if you get something like that. But yeah, I can certainly see that scenario happening, Mike, because it just seems to me like based on, you mentioned Vic Tafer's reporting earlier, and now what you're saying, it's just kind of whatever they had to do. They felt like they had to extend that tag to Josh Jacobs, where in perfect world for Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, they wouldn't have done that at all. Because their actions, like I said, have made it seem like they don't really think that Josh Jacobs is a part of their long-term future. Right? You can go back to when they didn't pick up the 5th-year option. That's one thing. That's one thing that you've reported, Mike, that he is not happy about. The fact that if they had just picked that up, he would have had $8 million for this year already, and we wouldn't be in this situation. And then they give him the tag, and then they don't really negotiate. And so you're at this point where either Josh Jacobs is going to pounce on that 10.1, as you just said, or maybe it goes away. And if it goes away, that kind of sucks, right? I mean, I don't know. I maybe it just, you're principled and you take a stand, and that's just what you're willing to do. And if that's the case, good for him. Go bet on yourself, and then we'll see what happens when you go into free agency next year, or if you go into free agency in August, or whatever it happens to be. But that's just, it's not an ideal place for any player, especially a running back who was the league leader in rushing last year. It's just an odd situation.
The irony, if the word is being used here properly, and again, I never know if it is that if he would go to the Chiefs, he would land with Andy Reid. And Andy Reid is the coach who has rescinded the tag twice before. Jeremiah Trotter, 2002, in June, he went to Washington and got a big contract. And then they did it to Corey Simon, defensive tackle, in September. And he landed with the Colts, and it was a disaster, and he was never heard from again. So Josh Jacobs, welcome to Kansas City, and he knows he won't get 10-1, but it is a matter of principle at this point. He's pissed off about how everything's gone. And I really do think Mark Davis is the audience of one in all of this, that they are hoping comes to the conclusion on his own, but as he's nudged there by circumstance, that the right move is to rescind the tender and part ways with one of the most important players on the team. And really, with or without him, are they really going to contend this year in the AFC West? I think that's a stretch. It's all they can do to just stay afloat in that division and in that conference. The Texans are the one team that you look at and say it's going to be rough. The next team after the Texans, the Raiders, it's going to be rough in that division and in that conference this year. All right. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.